I'm shooting this video today to kind of give you guys a rundown about who I am and what I do, and kind of go from there. Pretty simple guy. I started tuning in 2008. I actually started with the Nissan SR20s and worked my way through them, the RB25s and KA24s. A bunch of different motors that Nissan offered. I worked for a guy down in Westchester, and him and I together kind of learned how to do the chip tuning on the old OBD1 Nissan ECUs. It's pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I really liked the SRs. I began drifting around the same time, and when I did that, I spent a lot of time tuning my own vehicle, messing around, changing this, changing that, all kinds of stuff. Like I said, I started with the chip tuning. After the chip tuning, I kind of got into doing Apexi Power FCs and Haltex. It was kind of my computer of choice, I guess you could say. Built a couple cars that were making 400, 500, 600 horsepower, and was pretty happy with them. I ended up moving out of that shop, and I worked for myself for a while, renting a space in Downingtown, and that's where I started dyno tuning full time for myself. I was doing fabrication and dyno tuning. Mainly what I did was, the same stuff I was working on when I worked for the first place. I was tuning the SRs, the RB25s. I think I had just started touching on the 1Js a little bit. One setup I got into that I was really deep into pretty well, and I was one of the first to really get something going that was kind of cool with it, was doing the 1UZs in a 240SX. I actually built a Formula Drift car for myself that had a first gen 1UZ in it with some custom cams from a guy in Seattle, I think is who made them for me. And it was run individual throttle bodies with a Haltech at ECU. Sponsored by Haltech for a little bit there. And that was kind of where I really started getting involved with tuning and starting to play around with some of the coding and stuff like that went along with it. After that, I did that. I ran that shop for a little while, and in 2012, I moved to Maryland, and I actually was working for a company down there building the Z cars, the Nissan Z cars, and the GTRs. It was kind of an eye opener for me. For the most part, about the highest horsepower car I had done at that point was somewhere in the 600 to 700 horsepower range. And some of the guys that are kind of newer to all this, really 600 to 700 horsepower back in 2010, 2012 era, especially in the drifting world, which is where I came from, that was quite a bit of power. The one car that I put together was a VQ car. And it made like 500 and some horsepower, and I drove it at Englishtown, New Jersey. It was ridiculous. I was, kind of like, wow, I can't believe how well this car works. I was really happy, with the setup. We had taken that car, and originally I think it made like 480, something like that. I did some modifications to it, did a little bit of a retune on the dyno, and it made it was over 500 horsepower, and we continued to keep it like that. For the entire next season of Formula Drift that car got driven in. That's pretty cool. And then, like I said, I started down at the place in Maryland I was working at. I'm not going to really drop any names. I don't need to get any other shops involved or anything like that. That's what I got going on in this video. But I worked at another place down in Maryland. I liked it. It was a big facility, 22,000 square foot. They had 3-axis CNC, 2-axis lathe, and they had an all-wheel drive Dynajet 448, which I had at that point. I no longer had a dyno. When I moved out of the shop in Downingtown, the dyno went along with it. So I was kind of lacking on the tuning at that point. I was out of it for maybe about a year or so. And do a little bit of commuting around to do some tuning, but that was about it. So working down there was kind of eye opener for me. We had cars coming in, brand new GTRs, guys would throw parts on them, and we were making 8,000-9,000 horsepower with a flick of a switch, pretty much. I don't know how familiar you are with the GTRs, but you're looking at a vehicle that you're gonna be putting some power into just out of the box, and you know, to be able to do anything real drastic with them, you're dropping a motor and pulling the turbos on. The most drastic thing I did when I was down there is I did a full Datsun transmission build and a full engine build on a 2009 GTR, and that trans and motor setup all together made $1595 to the wheels. Pretty ridiculous car, to say the least. You know, running it down the street and on the track, it was a handful. It had progressive boost on it. You know, it was making so much power that we couldn't run, you know, full boost in first, second, and third. It had to, you know, progressively build it up. And that kind of was where I'd say I kind of progressed a little bit further with, you know, tuning more than just, you know, getting the motors to, you know, make some power. This was a lot of transmission tuning and stuff like that involved with it as well. So I was there for a couple of years. You know, Baltimore was fun, but it wasn't really working out for me. You know, it was interesting to live down there and see everything, but, you know, I'm originally from Reading, Pennsylvania. I was born and raised here. I grew up on 30-some acres of land, and, you know, living in the city, I kind of was like, I don't want to do that too much anymore. So I moved back home. On my move back home, I actually kind of hung up everything with the car career for a little bit. While I was working down in Maryland, I had signed a contract saying that I was under a non-compete. So by me doing that, I had to go and figure out something else to do. So what I decided to end up doing was I had been getting into the engineering field pretty deep. I was doing a lot of industrial design and product development while I was working down in Maryland. It was something I had already kind of gotten my teeth into when I was living up here in Reading before I had moved down to Maryland. You know, I had been going to a local area community college for mechatronics engineering, and you know, decided that, you know, I liked engineering, but I didn't want to work an office job. I really liked, you know, building cars and doing cars and all that kind of stuff, and the office stuff wasn't really for me. So going down to this job in Maryland was kind of a mix of that. I got to have a nice office. I was, you know, developing parts, putting parts into production, testing stuff. You know, it's kind of a whole thing, you know, and then on top of that, I was making custom parts. At that point, I was building myself an A86 Corolla with an SR20 in it. So I was kind of going all out and doing all kinds of stuff down there, and I didn't really have much of a life. I was working there. I'd start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be lucky if I was out of there at 8 o'clock at night sometimes. So I came back home, and I had gotten a job offer up here to work for a company that's about an hour away from where I currently live, doing industrial design work for, it's basically, I don't even know how to explain it too well. It's industrial equipment for doing like power lines, pipeline work, stuff like that. A lot of it was hydraulic engineering, mechanical engineering, electronic engineering, all kind of mixed in one. I got in on that company on the ground floor, and you know, worked for them in an office and developing parts for their product. And I was building the parts, you know, on the floor. I'd develop it. When I first started, it was just me and the owner. I would, you know, go and design the product on my computer in SolidWorks, and then I would go to out on the floor and, you know, order the steel up and build the whole frame and hydraulics assemblies and all that stuff. And pretty much what the trailers would do for the to give you a basic rundown is, you know, you look at the local power company by you. This trailer would go up and it would pick up that reel and be able to pay the reel in and out of the cabling or whatever was on it. You know, we had ones that were as ridiculous as they were remote controlled, so you could disconnect them from the truck and be able to drive the trailer around underneath, you know, or at a substation or whatever. You know, they were made for in the city and stuff like that. You know, we even made setups that were made to be able to be flown by a helicopter, so they could be picked up and flown to different facilities if needed. I actually designed a trailer for FEMA after the Fukushima incident that was for them if anything happened to our nuclear power plants. These were generators and cabling trailers that had all the power reels and everything on them, so they could just hook up a helicopter to it and fly it to wherever it needed to go throughout the country, so that we wouldn't potentially run into a meltdown situation like they had in Fukushima. But I did that for a little bit over 2 years. Desk job wasn't working for me. You know, it just one of those things where I just really just couldn't do it. It was fun, but I was so tired at the end of a day's worth of work that I wasn't able to build the stuff I wanted to build. You know, I've been building cars since I was a kid, you know, to kind of go a little bit before I started tuning. When I was in high school, my best friend and I went to national competitions together, you know, doing competitions for mechanical or automotive repair. And I actually got second in the country in 2005 in the VICA Skills USA automotive competition. And we were the, my best friend and I were the state champions for the Ford automotive repair competition as well. So, you know, I've been in the car situation for a long time. I've been in dealerships. I've worked on my own. You know, but tuning was really kind of always one of the things I really like to do. I really like to do tuning. I really like to do the fabrication and building side of stuff. So, you know, what I ended up doing after I decided I was leaving from the mechanical engineering job I had, I started a little endeavor with my best friend. We got involved with a car shop, and he had been working there for years, and we started, you know, we took it over and kind of started building it from there. In the midst of all this, I had that little 8086 that I had talked about earlier with SR20. At that point, I had put that SR20 through its loops over at Englishtown, New Jersey for the Club Loose events, and that SR was pretty much trash. You know, I had a little bit of an incident with bad E85 and I burned a cylinder up. I had progressed at that point into putting a LS in it. I picked up an LS from one of my other friends. What it had done to it was they had put a cam in it, and when they put the lifters back in, they didn't put the trays in right. And the trays broke, the lifters spun, and wiped the Texas speed cam out. So I took that block and tore it apart, and just went over everything. I put an LS1, or actually a GTO cam in it, and set of the smaller truck heads off of a 4.8. Put the thing together, and I had been working on this while I was doing my desk job, and it was literally taking me, I think I had been working on it for over a year, and I wasn't getting anywhere with it. So once I took on this endeavor with my friend, I kind of put that on the back burner a little bit. I didn't really have a lot of time with trying to manage a new business to figure out anything as far as what to do with the Corolla. At that point I had the motor and trans sitting in it, but that was about as far as it went. And if you go through my YouTube videos, you'll see I have some videos on there of the car when it first started up, and you know, I got some videos up there with me driving it with the camera that I'm actually shooting this with out at Englishtown, New Jersey. Pretty cool stuff to look at if you're into it. Anyways, so that was kind of my first step into the LS stuff. I hadn't really messed around too much with it beforehand. My buddy had been building a LS1 S2000 for his friend, and that was where I got started on the HP Tuner software. For the most part at that point I had been in almost everything. You know, I was in the AM software, I was in Haltech, I was in Motec. but I hadn't gotten into any of the stock ECU tuning for the LSs with HP tuners or even EFI Live. I was using uprev on these things, but that was about it. You know, I wasn't really doing a whole lot of stock ECU stuff. So, you know, with this LS1 S2000, that was our first step with kind of me figuring out how to use HP tuners. It's actually a simple program. I knew it wasn't going to be an issue to use it. It was just going to be figuring out where everything's at. So got started on that car, got that thing running pretty good. It was a pretty cool project. Thing made, you know, just pretty much stock LS1 power, but still in an S2000, pretty cool build. From that point on, we started putting LSs in a couple more things here and there. I messed around with a couple pickup trucks that had, that I did a couple of the diesel tunes on, and kind of dug more and more into the stock ECU tuning that was available with using HP, and at that point I actually bought EFI Live as well. I was using both of them. You know, I did an LMM GM, and I did a couple other, you know, just random tunes on stuff. But the big thing was when I left down in Maryland, I left being able to have any kind of place to do any kind of dyno work. So I kind of was at my wit's end a little bit with some of that. You know, I know how beneficial it is to use a dyno, especially a good one. You know, this dyno that we're sitting here in right now is probably one of the best I've been on. I've probably been on somewhere around 10 different dyno setups. You know, and this one is just, it makes me happy. You know, it's pretty cool what some of the stuff I can do with it. But, you know, the one thing that really was driving me nuts is doing street tuning is terrible. You know, and I actually, I had a couple incidences throughout the years where I've been with somebody in a car, they've been driving it, and we've almost had a near accident. And actually, a couple years back, I actually wrecked a car street tuning it. You know, I don't have any problem admitting it. I made a mistake, and you know, I was trying to tune the guy's car. I was out. You know, I got in the throttle, and I don't even know exactly what happened. Something happened with the steering on it, and it got away from me, and I went off the road with it. You know, and that was really one of the last. Actually, I think that was the last street tune I did, because at that point, you know, once you wreck somebody's car, that's kind of where it's like, you know what, like, I shouldn't have been driving that car and holding a laptop. You know, it's really what it comes down to. So, you know, it just wasn't working. So, as I got more and more work going in, I was doing some of the newer stuff. I had a guy come in with a new Z06. It was a 2008, and I put a full Edelbrock supercharger kit on it. Pretty cool kit. You know, it bolts right the hell on there. There's not a lot of work to do. You know, the hardest thing to do is to pin the crank. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. You know, I had no idea what the hell it was going to make, and I don't even remember off the top of my head what it did make. But I was fresh and new, and you know, I was like, man, this is cool, and I went for it. And you know, I want to say it was you know, in the mid-5, somewhere around there. I'd have to go back and figure it out. But you know, it was pretty cool. And then what I was doing at that time was I was traveling all the way down to Lansdale, and you know, I don't have any permission to say anybody's shop names in this, so I don't want to go plug in a shop and they don't want me saying their name, so I'm not going to mention who it is. But I've been friends with the guy that owns the shop for a long time, since I started drifting. You know, he trusted in me to be able to come down there and rent dyno time from him. And he has a great facility where he's at down there in Lansdale. And I was renting time from him. I'd go down, I'd spend a couple hours on the dyno, you know, and I was paying to do what it was. And I would, you know, a lot of times I was kind of putting myself out there for the customer, you know, just to get a good tune on their car, because I had done the work and I wanted to do the tune too. That was where I really started to realize again, like, man, I need to get a dyno, I need to get a dyno, I need to get a dyno. You know, I was kind of beating myself up over it. I'm the type of person, when I need a tool, I want it. And if I don't get it, I'm going to figure out a way to get it. And I was just kind of getting to where I didn't want to be driving people's cars, you know, an hour, or like this car, when this thing got done, I had to trailer it an hour, you know. It just didn't really work out too well. But, you know, I spent the time I needed to. I went down there a bunch of times. My one really good friend, he built an RX-7 with a 5.3 in it, running a turbo 400 trans, and that car made 790 horsepower with me behind the laptop down there at the shop in Lansdale. It was about, I think, about 18 pounds of methanol injection. Pretty basic tune. You know, nothing real crazy on that. But, you know, it was pretty much an eye-opener to me. And like, man, you can bolt a turbo onto these things and they'll make some crazy power. You know, so that was our first thing. And then he ended up, did a couple things here and there with it. And we had a couple problems that day on the dyno, but we did a couple things here and there with it. And the car ended up running like a 9.4, something like that, down at Maple Grove Raceway. So, you know, that was kind of where I was like, you know what, I want to finish my Corolla. And I went and I got into my Corolla, got it all finished, and like I said, there's some videos on my YouTube channel if you want to watch them, kind of give you an idea what I had going on with that car. From there, really, it was a downhill slope from there into the whole tuning aspect of HP tuners. You know, my buddy put a 5.3 and a G35, you know, and that went from being just an NA G35 to a turbo G35 and blah, blah, blah. It kind of brings me up to speed on where we're at now. We're sitting here in Carl Ruths' garage. Give you a little bit of backstory on Carl. I've been friends with Carl since I was 13 years old. When I went to Automotive Technology Center in Berks County here, I was introduced to Carl, and I worked for him while I was in high school. I worked in his machine shop. The shop we're in right now is right outside the city of Reading, and it's a 3-bay garage with a dyno in it. And the other 2 bays are just working bays. One's for inspections, one's for like bigger jobs. But Carl has been in this building here since 1955. He's 82 years old as I'm shooting this video. He's been a good mentor of mine. I learned a lot from him back when I was a kid, as far as building motors, machining motors, you know, how to run machines, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I learned a lot from him in that process. You know, I kind of wanted to learn other things, and I left working with him when I was 16 years old. You know, so we kind of split ways. I hadn't talked to Carl for a couple years, he had a dyno in here since the 70s by a company called A&W Dyno, and I will plug them because their dyno was crap, and they didn't really want to help Carl at all. He was one of the first people to ever have one of their dynos, and you know, the thing never worked right, you know, from the 70s. Carl, giving a little bit of background on him, he was a IHRA funny car dragster racer. He was in one of the, you know, worst crashes of the 80s or 90s, something like that, at Bristol. You know, he was in a pretty fiery accident. He's got some burns and stuff from it and all that kind of stuff. But he ran a 56 Ford Crown Vic Nostalgia for years, you know, and he was kind of a trendsetter. One of the vehicles he raced that people know a lot about is also the Pet Vet. He's been a drag racer for years, you know, and really kind of was a good mentor to me when I was a kid. So coming up to speed now, you know, we're talking 2000 and about 2016, somewhere around there. I ran into Carl. Yeah, it would be 2016. I ran into Carl, and he told me he was getting a new dyno. And I'm like, oh, cool, sounds good, you know. I hadn't really talked to him in years. I've run into him here and there. But he's one of those guys where sometimes he's not much of a talker, and sometimes he is. And, you know, we'd run into to each other at random places, like at the gas station or something like that. So, you know, I ran into him actually at the bank. And I was on my motorcycle, and he was in his pickup truck, and his truck wouldn't start. So he ended up needing to use my cell phone. And we talked for a little bit while he was waiting to have the secretary come get him, and all that kind of stuff. He's telling me, oh, I'm getting this new dyno, and I went to the PRI show and saw it, and I've been looking at it for about 6 months now. And I'm like, okay, and literally we're talking, this is a dyno 5 minutes from where I'm living at the moment, and I'm like, man, that's a big big deal. Carl's had a dyno for years, and I can't believe he's upgrading. The guy was, he's in his 80s. He's almost, I think he was 79 or 80 at that point, and now he's going and buying a new piece of equipment for the tune of $40,000, and like, wow, it's a big game changer. Didn't really know much, but I told him, I was like, hey, let me know when you get a dyno, and we'll go from there. So I told you about that Corvette. That was not long after Carl and I had that conversation, but he didn't have his new dyno in here yet. Did that Corvette down in Lansdale, and I was kind of having the shits of driving all the way down there. It was kind of a pain in the ass. And to only do one tune, it just wasn't worth it. And I didn't really have enough of a market, to do multiples. And I didn't really even think about doing it that way. But I just didn't do it. And I guess maybe to a certain extent I needed to be humbled a little bit, and I thought I was a shit, and just, kind of was like, I'll just do what I want to do. I didn't really look at how anybody else was doing stuff. So, I think it was like about November of 2016, Carl gives me a call over at my shop and says, hey, we got our dyno in, come check it out. So at the time, one of my local buddies had a C5 Corvette with a nitrous shot on it. He was doing most of his own tuning, and he gave it to me and said, hey, I'd like to have it tuned. So came over here and set it all up, and there was a guy that was working for Carl at the time, was sitting in this very chair, and he ran the dyno for me. It was kind of weird for me. I wasn't used to having somebody else control everything and do all that stuff, but whatever. I wasn't going to tell them how to do their thing. But did that job and ran it on the dyno, and that was kind of that. I don't even remember exactly, but it was some pretty good numbers. I started looking at some stuff with the dyno while I was here, and that was it. We moved forward a little bit. We had a couple cars come in, and over at the shop that wanted to have the car's dyno tuned, and we worked with them and got them over here, and we're working with Carl. At that point, that was about the middle of the winter, going from 16 to 17. I got hurt and actually went and tuned this car down in Lansdale, because we had originally tuned it down there. There's a whole backstory with this car. This car's got quite a bit of history with me and also the owner. This car was originally tuned down there, made I think around 500, 480, something like that. And we were kind of like, okay, pretty decent numbers. I didn't even know at the time it was probably one of the highest horsepower still in supercharged G37s that there was. And the owner was kind of telling me, oh yeah, like do this, do that, and like it'll make more. So we kind of wanted to compare on the same dyno. Okay, now for those of you that, I'm sure there's tons of stuff out there, and if you know anything about dynos, everybody will say, oh, this dyno says that, and this dyno says this, and this one's a heartbreaker, and this one's not, and blah, blah. So I'm the kind of person where I don't really care about the numbers as much as I care about what did it gain. And also, how good is the tune? You can go to any tuner, and he can do power pulls for you, okay? And if they don't want to do power pulls for you, then they just don't know what they're doing. But any tuner can do power pulls and make an adjustment at wide open throttle. But it's the tuners that take the time to have a car go through its entire drivability curve, and you're running at $2 grand, $3 grand, $4 grand, and see what you got going on. As a customer, it also comes down to what dyno does the shop you're going to have. Okay, there's inertia dynos, and there's also load-bearing dynos. A load-bearing dyno is what you want for drivability. You're not able to get a vehicle to where it's drivable if you can't put a load on it. And an inertia dyno isn't going to really simulate what it's like going down the road. Really what you use an inertia dyno for is making power and, showing what kind of power the car will make at wide open throttle. But it doesn't give you any load to be able to, see what it's actually making. So you kind of end up with, only half the job, I guess is the easiest way to put it. With the dyno we have, it's a Dynacom 7500. It has an eddy brake on it. I'll give you a little bit of explanation on eddy brake. What an eddy brake is a big giant disc in there. It looks like a big brake disc. And outside of it there's a round set of magnets that are wired in unison with each other. And what it does is it makes a magnetic force to slow that brake down and put a resistance on it. Pretty cool piece of technology if you think about it. But you know, the eddy brake will, on this dyno, we'll take it and pretty much I can have a car stop with it if I want to. You know, I've tuned stuff to where I'm at 80% load on it for a little bit if I have to be, just to kind of get it to hold there and see where we're at. With our dyno we have, I don't even know if it'll come up in the video, but there's a big master switch back there on the wall. That's what I use to turn the brake on and off. You know, when you're doing inertia-based power numbers, you don't need the brake on. It actually can make a little bit of a parasitic load. It really shouldn't, but it can. And is some skewed numbers here and there because of that. As far as ours go, I've had the brake on, like the switch for the brake on with it on 0% load and see nothing. So it's really kind of like, is it really something or not? I never really see a difference. But you know, obviously with a load on something, you will see a difference because the engine has to work a little bit harder and all that kind of fun stuff. Kind of getting into stuff, like I said, I was hurt at the time. You know, I went and I actually tuned this on crutches down in Lansdale, and it made like 530, something around those lines. And the big change that we made was we got rid of the intake on it, on the front of the supercharger, and we put the mass airflow sensors in the boost tube. That made a big difference. We were able to get a lot more airflow out of it, and you know, kind of put us with a much cooler setup, and it looks kind of cool that way too. That was around the time where I was doing a little bit more, because I wasn't able to work on my feet all day, so I was actually going places and doing tuning, you know, for other vehicles around the area. I went to a couple of different dynos and was doing some stuff as I needed to, kind of make some extra money while I was out of work. In the middle of all that, the guy that was here working for Carl, he decided to leave. You know, and Carl was kind of in a rock and a hard place. He had called me and said, hey, you know, I've known you since you were, you know, a youngster. Would you like to come work with me and run the dyno, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's where things kind of got started. So I came in here and, you know, we used to have some pretty janky stuff set up in here. You know, just two separate little monitors, and I would have my laptop in the car, and, you know, to kind of look at the place the way it is now compared to how it was when I first came here a couple years, or, you know, I guess a couple years back, kind of a big difference. Since then, Carl and I have kind of been building this place up a little bit, and I've been building a lot more with myself as far as what I'm available to do and what I can accomplish and stuff like that. You know, actually this car is sitting in here right now because it's getting switched over to HB tuners. You know, I'm kind of interested to see what we can squeeze out of it, if there's any more or not. There's not a whole lot left on the G37 motor, but, you know, we'll try it. I just actually pulled a 6.0 Silverado out of here. So first one I've done that I was willing to really push it. You know, I've done a little bit of research and looked at a couple other sides of stuff, and, you know, I've done a 6.0 before, and as soon as it hit 600 foot-pounds of torque, I stopped. You know, I didn't want to make any more power than that with it because I was afraid to break the rods in a Gen 3 6.0. Today I just finished up a 6.0 and a Silverado pickup truck with a Gen 3 turbo kit on it, and the truck made 760 horsepower and 850 some foot-pounds of torque on E85, which actually with the content sensor and the mixture of the gas in the tank, it came out to about E66, which really the difference between E66 and E85 isn't going to be much for power output, especially when you have a content sensor like the GMs can have to interpolate the fuel scale for you. So, um, I've done quite a bit in here now. We've had cars in here, carbureted, big block, Camaros in here, Gen 1 Camaros. The highest number right now on this dyno that's about 2 years old now is 1,052 horsepower. Pretty crazy for a naturally aspirated dark block vehicle. But it's a heads-up car. There's a local guy that does carburetors and such. He makes his own custom carburetors, and he came over and we did the car together here on the dyno, and we were really impressed with the power output it made. I've done a bunch of Mustangs. I do a ton of GMs. That's probably the biggest thing that I do at this point. Kind of miss my Nissans a little bit. That's what I started with, and I miss doing them, but I don't feel as though there's as much of a market for them anymore as there used to be. And most of the Nissans that there are now getting LSs in them, or other swaps like JZs, stuff like that. We've had a couple JZs in here. I'm actually doing a JZ swap in the bay next door, in a 240. It's kind of a little bit of everything I do around here. I'm still doing engineering. I do some side work in SolidWorks for people here and there. I design parts. I'm actually working on, I have a 6.0 that I built for going in. I have a one owner 1973 Mercedes 450 SL. It was my grandmother's, so it's, well, technically third owner, but it's just been in the family since then, since she bought it brand new. The car isn't really worth a whole lot, but it's still in good shape. And if you know anything about the old Mercedes, everything is about $100 or more just for getting anything for it. They're ridiculously priced, and you have something stupid like a ignition controller go out and you're looking at spending a few $100. So I kind of wanted to build something again, and make a cool LS car. I actually scattered the motor in my Corolla. I had a ring or a piston pin lock up, and it just took a piston and demolished it. And I should have known after 2 years of beating the hell out of it over at Englishtown, New Jersey, that something was going to happen eventually, and it did. I found what was going to happen. So, I decided that I was going to pick up a 6.0, and I'm doing the 6.0 in this 450 Mercedes. That's going to be running a 7588 turbo on it, and I've been doing some product design for making engine mounts, manifold setup, and all that kind of stuff. I have an LS2 in SolidWorks that I use for designing parts and stuff when I need to. So, kind of gives you an idea on a little bit of the stuff I can do, and I probably only touch the tip of the iceberg on a lot of the stuff that I get involved in. As far as the shop here, we're open as of right now from 8 to 4, and we do dyno days on the spring and in the fall. We actually have one coming up here next weekend. I don't even know if this video is going to be out and published by the time we have our dyno day, but it is something that we have going on. We have a pretty good facility here. Like I said, our dyno is a Dynacom 7500, which is a 24-inch roll. It's in the floor, we run a pretty cool setup here. I have it set up now that I can actually sit in the car and do all my tuning off this big screen I put up here. About 2 months ago I came in, I redid the floor in here, which is getting kind of crusty. It needs to be washed before our dyno day. It's pretty much about it. I also have gotten into messing around with injector testing. I bought an injector flow bench. I guess I've had it for about 3 weeks now. I've been decapping the injectors and flowing them and doing some for some local guys and stuff like that. We do quite a bit of stuff around here, and like I mentioned earlier, Carl has a full machine shop back at his house. We do quite a bit, anything from, somebody just coming in needs some basic maintenance to going all the way up to, doing a full out build. being able to get the parts and stuff like that for everything as well. So I think that pretty much concludes it. You know, feel free to post any questions that you have or anything like that in the comments section. I'll try to get back to everybody as quick as I can, you know, and answer any questions that might come up. Also feel free to go through some of my other videos, kind of get an idea of some of the stuff I do around here. I haven't been very active on my channel for a while. You know, I got a couple videos that are all the way back like 7 years old that show some of the stuff that I've done in the past and have quite a bit of views on them. But as of what I have now, don't have a whole lot. So feel free to kind of roll through my stuff and check me out. And you know, my Instagram is just my last name and my first name, Hettinger Brad. Thanks, guys.